Hi guys, how are you doing? I hope everything's going good. We're well into our summertime and holidays and swimming and rollerblading and doing all of those wonderful things. Hopefully you've been able to get outside and enjoy some picnic time, go to the park, and just enjoy summer. We're reading the book The Prince Warrior by Priscilla Shriver. And we are going to start chapter 9, but last week we left the 4 warriors. They were having to choose between 3 gates. One was wide and easy to go through. There was a sandstorm on one side and a spooky city on the other gate. And they had to follow their breastplates and make decisions and remember the instructions that Ruach had given them before they had set off on this adventure. So we're going to start on chapter 9, like I said. Walking on Circles, it's called. Levi ambled along the cobblestone path, enjoying the warm sunshine, the gentle breeze. It was pretty sweet in Hordius, he thought. The sun shone. It was not too hot, not too cold. Around him, butterflies fluttered. At least that's what he thought they were. Although they didn't really look like any butterflies he'd ever seen before. They were as big as birds, their huge, lustrous wings changing colors as they flew. They landed on trees and flowers that lined the road all around him, beating their wings slowly. As he moved along the path, they moved too, following his progress. Hopping over each other and landing on flowers and tree branches on either side of him, he had a strange feeling that they were watching him. After a while, he became unnerved by their constant vigilance. He rushed over to a group of them and waved his arms as if to scare them off, and they fluttered a bit, but as soon as he returned to walking, they returned to their watching. He tried to forget about the butterflies, concentrating on the castle that lay ahead. It looks more fantastical than Disney World. Maybe there were rides, he thought, and food. He was feeling a bit hungry. Ice cream would be good. Cookies and cream, slathered in hot fudge and whipped cream on top, that would hit the spot. The castle began to appear as though it was made of frosting and candy, and he shook his head, sure his eyes were playing tricks on him. It was pretty, though, shimmering on a fountain of clouds nestled between the tall, hazel-green mountain peaks. He couldn't help but thinking of Brianna, wishing she had come with him. If she had, she'd likely be making friends with the butterflies and dreaming up a wild story about what was going on in the castle, a story which might include fairies playing dodgeball with gumdrops or racing each other on a rainbow-colored unicorn. The butterflies kept watching him. Sweat dripped from his brow. He was getting tired from walking so far. How far had he walked anyway? He had no idea. Wish I had my skateboard. His boots felt heavy and hot despite their ventilation strips. There didn't seem to be any air flowing through them at all. He sat down on a tree stump by the side of the road to take them off. He threw them aside and stretched out his legs, wiggling his toes. Much better. He stood up, and the cobble path felt cool and uncharacteristically smooth under his bare feet, not rough and bumpy like he expected. That was strange. It was, after all, a stone path, but maybe everything in Hordius was kind of perfect. Even the cobblestones didn't hurt your feet. Awesome. He glanced down at the tree stump that he'd been sitting on. Something nagged at him, a certain unnamed doubt settling on his shoulders. He looked around at the path, the sky, the trees, the butterflies, and then back at the tree stump. Hadn't he seen that tree stump before? He remembered because it had looked like a bear cub from far away. He walked on for a while in his bare feet, carrying his boots, one in each hand. Another tree stump came into view, and he stared at it. Bear cub. Exactly the same as the last one. The flowers surrounding it, hadn't he seen those flowers around the last tree stump too? The nagging doubt grew even heavier. His eyes darted around, searching for some clue, that when he realized that all the trees were exactly the same as well. Maybe they'd been planted that way, he thought, in a design. But that tree stump... He was imagining things. It couldn't be the same. He looked up at the distant castle in the clouds. Weird, he thought. He didn't seem to be getting any closer, and he'd been walking for hours already. At least it felt like hours, although he couldn't really tell because the sun hadn't moved in the sky. Maybe it was only minutes. But he was so tired, and the kingdom was still just as far away as it had been when he started out. Something moved behind him. A person? An animal? He whirled around to look, but it was gone. He put down the boots and then reached out to touch the tree stump. It felt smooth and hard, not rough-edged, no animal teeth marks, no scent, no sap, or pine-like stumps in his backyard at home. In fact, the stump looked like it was like the artificial apples his mom kept in the basket in their kitchen table for decoration. He remembered trying to take a bite out of one of them and being shocked when he discovered it was plastic. The realization hit him like a 2-ton runaway truck. Plastic. This tree stump, it was fake. He gazed around him once more, his heart racing. It was slowly dawning on him that everything he was seeing in this world, everything was made of plastic. He touched the trees, the flowers, all fake. He could feel a breeze, but the leaves on the trees didn't even rustle. The only thing that moved were the butterflies. He wondered if they might be fake too, like those mechanical butterflies he'd seen online when he'd been shopping for a new skateboard. He put down his boots and he walked over to one of them, slowly flapping its wings as it sat there on the fake flower, and he reached out to touch it. Ouch! A sharp pain shot down his finger. He pulled it back quickly and looked close. A welt was starting to form. Since when did butterflies sting? His finger really hurt. He shook his hand out, trying to shake away the pain. The welt puffed up and turned red like a bee sting. He'd once gotten a bunch of those when he and his friend thought it would be a good idea to throw a baseball at a beehive. He remembered the painful welts all under his arms and neck, and the swelling and the itching. The sting felt worse than all of those put together. Thankfully, it stopped hurting pretty fast, faster than the regular bee sting anyway. But as he looked at his finger, he saw that the red welt was turning purple. The skin around the wound felt tight, like it was hardening. It couldn't be forming a scar already, could it? The purple turned into a deep, dark gray. He touched the callous surface forming on the skin. It was cold and hard like metal. Levi's heart raced. He felt a knot of fear in the pit of his stomach. The butterfly was still fluttering, watching him. Its wings seemed to be changing color. The bright red, yellow, and purple hues dissolved into dark gray, the same color as the welt on his finger. The wings seemed to change shape, the soft, graceful edges becoming bent and jagged. It was almost as if the butterfly was turning into a metal as well. The butterfly continued to watch him. Then Levi saw dozens of tiny red beams of lights flashing like lasers from its eyes. A shiver crept up Levi's spine and curled around his neck, making him shudder. Fear whispered softly in his ear, as if the butterfly itself were speaking, "You're trapped." He backed away slowly while the butterflies began swooping around his head. They lit on the trees and the flowers around him, their wings no longer full of color, beating slowly. There was something definitely very wrong about them. The more frightened he felt, the calmer they appeared, as if they were just waiting for something. Levi walked faster and faster. He wished he had a skateboard. Then he was running, but he still didn't seem to be getting anywhere. The castle in the distance stayed very far away. It was like he was running in a circle or on a circle. He stopped, panting. He stared down at the stones under his feet, and he took a step and then another. He was moving forward, and yet he wasn't. He suddenly thought of a circus performer that he had seen balancing on top of a huge ball. The performer ran, making the ball spin, but he didn't really go anywhere. Levi started walking fast again, his feet too sore now to run. He couldn't remember where he'd left his boots. He'd put them down when he went to investigate the butterfly. So they must be by the tree stump, but when the tree stump came around again, they weren't there. He wondered if he should go and look for them, but he had no idea where to begin. No matter where he went, he didn't seem to get anywhere at all. The view ahead of him never changed, and he wondered if it was real or just a picture, like a backdrop in a play. He stopped walking. There was no point in walking anymore, he realized. It was clear that he wasn't moving forward, But perhaps if he went backward, he would somehow get back to the gates where he'd first started with the others. Maybe Xavier was still there. He had been having a lot of trouble making up his mind about which way to go. Levi could tell him what he had discovered, and maybe the way through the storm was the right path after all. He felt better having a plan in mind. He turned and started walking back. Maybe he'd find his boots along the way, but the same thing happened. The view never changed. He never got any closer to where he started, and there was no gate anymore. He was trapped. No, I can get out of this. Ruwak's not going to just leave me here, is he? He wasn't so sure about Ruwak. After all, he still hadn't even seen the dude's face. Maybe he had some kind of evil spirit disguised as a helpful guide, and it was his intention all along to trap him in this miserable place. Didn't evil things dwell in caves like trolls? He's not a troll. Evan had been so sure about that, but did that little kid know anything? Okay, Ruwak, if you can hear me, which way do I go now? No answer. He looked down at his breastplate. It was dark. The orb didn't spin. He hit it a few times with his fist to see if he could jump-start it. Nothing. Mom? Dad? Were they worried about him? Was his dad still at the wreck waiting for him? Maybe they didn't even know he was missing. The sun hadn't moved. Maybe the time wasn't passing back in his world. His world. He wondered if the earth existed anymore. He wondered about the other kids, too, and which way had they gone? Were they stuck somewhere, too? As he stood there thinking about what he could do next, he felt the ground under his feet shift. The tremor was slight, but enough to grab his attention. He stood as still as possible, wondering if any movement might cause more trouble. Several seconds passed as he waited. For what, he had no idea. Silence. Maybe it was nothing. He raised one foot to take another step, but he couldn't move it. He looked down and gasped. His bare feet were slowly disappearing into the cobble road as if the road itself melted away. He raised his head and called out, "Help!" But his plea echoed back to him, unanswered. Chapter 10. No turning back. Xavier braced himself, arms across his face, lips pursed, eyes closed, expecting to be deluged by the flying sand as soon as he passed through the gate. It took him a moment to realize that nothing had happened. He opened his eyes and peeked through the opening in his crossed arms. When he finally put them down, he marveled at the fact that the ferocious wind did not touch him at all. The storm raged all around him, but he couldn't feel it. Xavier was in the storm, but he wasn't in the storm. Levi, he thought. He wished he could go back and tell him that this way had been the right way after all. But when he looked back, he saw that the gate was gone. He noticed that his breastplate was pulsing faintly, and the pulsing got faster depending on which way he faced. He turned in a circle until the pulsing became a steady beam of light aimed at the ground just in front of his feet. He took a step that way, and another. The light continued to shine just a little bit ahead of him, pointing the way. He looked ahead. All he saw was wild, whirling sand, but as he took each step, making sure that the light from his breastplate was steady and didn't blink or flash, he was able to stay in the calm air. How is Levi doing? Xavier thought as he navigated through the storm. He wondered if he should have been more forceful about preventing Levi from taking another route. But maybe Levi was okay, sitting up there at that fancy castle, waiting for them, eating ice cream like he said. Xavier supposed he would find out when he got there, if he got there. There didn't seem to be an end to this sandstorm. He couldn't even glimpse the beautiful castle that had appeared through the wide gate. Had he made the right choice? All he knew for sure was this: there was no turning back now. He kept going, watching for the pulsing of the breastplate to correct his course now and then. After a while, it got sort of boring. He could see the sun at times through the breaks in the sandstorm, a fuzzy white circle in the sky. He wondered if it was the same sun that they had back in their world. But this sun didn't move at all. So it was impossible to know how much time had passed, or if time was even passing at all. He thought of his parents. Had they woken up yet? Did they know that he and his brother were gone? He wondered how Evan was doing in that gloomy town with the bossy girl with the big eyes. Had they gotten to the castle yet? Were they eating ice cream too, waiting for him to show up? Xavier couldn't remember the last time he'd been really alone like this. It wasn't a great feeling. He wished he hadn't had to split up in the first place. Why did they have to go through all this crazy stuff to get to a castle? What were they supposed to do when they got there? Was there going to be a battle then? Xavier hoped Ruach would suddenly appear to provide some answers, and then he remembered the last thing the little guide had said before he disappeared. You already have everything you need. Xavier had to trust that that was true. He took his next step into the light, and his foot sank in soft sand up to his ankle. He tugged it out and then took another step, but the foot began to sink slowly as well. It suddenly got so much harder to pull up his feet, to take more steps. Each time his boots sank deeper and deeper until he almost couldn't move at all. His heart raced and his breath caught in his throat as he realized that what he was walking in. Quicksand. Evan and Brianna walked silently along the dark street, which seemed to go on forever. Tall, gloomy buildings rose up on both sides of their windows, with their windows shuttered. They leaned inward, creaking eerily as if about to pounce on whoever walked by. There was no moon in the sky, no stars either. The duo couldn't see what lay ahead of them. The only illumination came from the street lamps, which winked on one by one as Evan and Brianna approached. Their breastplates glowed faintly, the steady beams of light shining in the little pools in front of their feet. Do you think anyone lives here? Brianna asked, gazing up at the run-down buildings. Zombies, maybe. There's no such thing as zombies, said Evan. I read a book about zombies, said Brianna. They hid in abandoned old buildings like this, and then they jump out while you're walking by minding your own business. There's no such thing as zombies. You read too much. How would you know? You probably don't read at all, do you? I do so, Evan said, reddening. Man, how did I end up in this awful place with a know-it-all girl? That roach guy must hate me. Ruach, Brianna said with a huff. You can't even pronounce his name. Well, it's a weird name, Evan said sullenly. I don't get this. We're supposed to be in a battle. This isn't a battle. I mean, what's the point? What if there are zombies? There aren't any zombies already. And if there were, what would we fight them with? We don't even have any weapons. Ruach said we have everything we need, said Brianna, sounding as though she were trying to convince herself more than Evan. If something jumps out at us, we'll know what to do, right? Like what? Like, I don't know yet. Trust the armor. That's what Ruach said. And your brother, he said it too. So you're taking advice from Xavier now? He seems smart, said Brianna with a small shrug. So you're saying I'm not smart? No, I didn't say that. He's just older and he probably knows more. Evan shook his head, disgusted. You're just like everyone else. You think that Xavier's so great. Well, believe me, if you had to live with him, you probably wouldn't think that. Brianna sighed but didn't answer. They walked in silence a while. Do you think Levi is okay? Brianna's voice was softer, with a softer edge and worry. He probably is doing better than we are right now, Evan muttered. I don't know. Levi's instructions were pretty clear about the wide gate and all. I'm not sure that it was such a good idea. Well, we followed the instructions and we aren't doing so well, are we? I mean, look at this place. Yeah, it's pretty creepy, Brianna said. At least it's not raining anymore. Wouldn't want to mess up with your hair, Evan muttered under his breath. What did you say? I said, it sure isn't a day at the fair, Evan said out loud. Are you sure we're supposed to be going this way? This is the way the armor is telling us to go, Brianna replied. They had already figured out that their breastplates stopped blinking and remained steady where they were headed in the right direction. Do you see it yet? Evan asked. That castle that we've got to get closer. Are we getting closer? I can't see it, Brianna said. I can hardly see anything. My feet hurt. I need to sit down for a minute. Sit where? There, Brianna said, pointing to a street lamp that had just blinked on. A bench. I don't think we should stop, Evan said, looking suspiciously at the bench as if it might be a trap. Just for a minute. I'm tired. The book didn't say anything about not taking a break, did it? No, but it didn't say we could either. See? Brianna flounced on the bench. Finally, look, nothing happened to me. I'm fine. Evan hesitated, still unsure about the safety of the bench. But after a moment, he sat down too. I miss my mom, he said, and my dad. You? I don't live with my mom and dad, Brianna said. You don't? How come? Are they dead? No, they aren't dead. They just can't take care of me. Me and my sisters live with my Nana and my Papa, Tony. Oh, grandparents are cool, Evan said. My grandparents made me a sweet shield and sword once. I mean, when I was a kid, he added. He makes stuff like that. He built a tree house for my mom when she was little. When we go to their house, we can still play in it, he said, as if he was hoping Brianna would be impressed. She wasn't. Stellar, she said with a hint of sarcasm. We moved to the country so we could be closer to them, Evan added. Did you want to move? Not really. I miss my friends, but it's nice having a house and a yard, and I have my own room now, too. Brianna sighed. I wish I had my own room. I have to share with my sisters. They hardly give me any space since I'm the youngest. Yeah, I know what that's like, being the youngest. No fun. Got that right. They were silent for a moment, and then Evan spoke again. I wonder what they're doing. Who? My parents, your sisters, our people. Do you think they're looking for us? Brianna shrugged. My sisters probably aren't. They hardly know I'm alive. But Nana and Grandpa Tony, maybe. They don't know we're gone yet. I mean, how long have we been here? I don't know. I can't tell. Me neither. Evan looked up at the sky and suddenly nervous. They had to get to the castle, wherever it was, soon. We should go, he said, and he stood up. Ah, Brianna cried, startling him. He whipped around and saw that the bench had tilted like a teeter-totter, and Brianna's end was literally sinking into the pavement like a ship going down in the sea. Take my hand, Evan yelled. Brianna reached for Evan's hand, and he pulled with all his might, making a growling sound with the effort. He thought he might pull her arm right out of the socket, but Brianna managed to push off and get free of the sinking bench. Together they watched it go down and disappear with a loud gurgle. What's happening? Brianna gasped. I don't know, but I think we need to get out of here. They stumbled away as the hole in the ground widened, swallowing cobblestones and the street lamps. It rumbled and groaned like a monster devouring the whole village. A building nearby began to shift, leaning in further as the ground under it was eaten away. Run, Evan said. The two kids racing up the street, but the sinkhole following them, widening so the whole buildings behind them began to crumble and crash into it. It was insatiable, gobbling up everything in its path. Evan and Brianna could hardly keep ahead of it. Suddenly, their breastplates began to blink furiously. The kids stopped, turning in all directions until the blinking light became a steady beam, aimed straight at a tall building at the sides of the street. It wants us to go that way, Brianna shouted. They ran to the building, but there was no door or even windows to climb through, just a solid wall. Now what do we do? Brianna asked, her voice as shaky as the ground underneath her feet. She covered her ears to block out the horrible gurgling noise of the buildings and the roadways being sucked into the pit. Evan leaned back and he looked up, searching for something to climb on or a window higher up. He noticed that the beam of his breastplate pointed up as well, straight up the wall. Up the wall? We have to go up the wall, he said to Brianna. Up the wall? Are you crazy? Brianna gasped. Why not? Spider-Man can do it. You are not Spider-Man. Evan lifted his foot, and as he did, he felt his boot vibrate, sending out long tentacles that stuck to the wall like Spider-Man. He thought, cool. He took another big breath, and he lifted the other foot off the ground and placing it on the wall so that his body was now parallel with the ground. He thought he might fall upside down and crack his head on the sidewalk, but he didn't. He was standing on the wall, looking straight ahead at the starless sky. His mouth dropped open in wonder. Brianna's eyes were even wider than usual. How did you do that? The boots, try them, Evan shouted. The ground under Brianna's feet began to tremble violently. Come on, step on the wall, or you'll fall in. She looked at him and nodded, breathing deeply. This is like jumping in the puddle of water, she thought. What have I got to lose? The breastplate lit up the wall in front of her as if to confirm that she was making the right decision. She jumped with both feet onto the wall just as the ground under her feet fell away. Her boots sprang to life, several tentacles shooting out and cementing her securely. She let out a half laugh, half gasp. Her boots gripped the wall like spider legs. She felt weightless, her own body defying gravity. Maybe this was how astronauts felt, she thought. She took a step. Her boot released easily and then gripped the wall once again. When she put her foot down, Evan began to run up the wall. He actually looked like an astronaut, his feet lifting and falling almost in slow motion. Brianna began to run after him, enjoying the sensation of the boots gripping and releasing. "Stellar," she said under her breath. "Wait till I tell my sisters." Oh! The building they were walking on started to shake and wobble. It was going to go down, shouted Evan. "Hurry!" They raced up the wall as fast as their boots would carry them, rounding the corner to the roof, just as the whole building began to collapse under them in a terrifying roar. We're going to leave it there, guys. All of them in their own battles in different places, like we all are. We all have things that are happening in our life that might not be pleasant. But remember, God is in control, and He knows you better than anybody else because He created you. So keep praying, reading your Bibles, and be good to one another. Enjoy the sunshine or the rain, whatever is happening with you. And we will see you next week. Have a great week, guys.